Hey crafters, welcome to Paulette's Pretty Paper Crafts. It's time for May 2016 name tags and card. Today I want to do something a little bit different. I'm going to call it watercolor stamping. I will connect you to a video from W+9 by Dawn where she does this amazing stamping and turns it into watercolor. We're going to use the W+9 Fresh Cut Florals. We're using the roses, the leaves, and this Hello Sentiment. We're going to use Paper Tray inks, Garden Variety number 2 Flower Pot, and the original Garden Variety for this little trio of flowers as filler. I'm using the Paper Studio Months of the Year for the month of May, and those will be stamped in Ranger Archival Jet Black ink. I've got some green for some leaves, some pretty colors for our rose, and blue for the flower pot, and a little purple and a light blue for the little filler flowers. I'm going to start with some watercolor paper that I've cut to 2.5 by 3 1/4. I love this 9 by 12 inch pad that I get at Walmart for a little bit under $7. It's a 140-pound cold press, which doesn't really mean a lot to me. I just love the thickness of it. And it has a smooth side and a rough side. And today we're going to use the rough side. Sometimes I'll stamp on the back if I'm, doing specific stamping. And I'm going to start with the Pacific Point and ink up my flower pot, and then I'm going to spritz it with some water. Now you can do this one of two ways. You can do it this way, or you can just stamp it and then add water with an aqua painter or a paintbrush. I really like the diffused look you get by spritzing the stamp, so that's why I'm doing it this way. I love the way it melts into the watercolor paper. I'm going to start with the Blush Blossom and the biggest image for the rose. I don't know if this is how you're supposed to use this one, but it's what I'm doing. And I am not diluting this image because we're adding so much different layers to the roses that it would be a moot point and you'd have to wait for that kind of dry time anyway. I am, however, going to spritz this Calypso Coral layer, and I am going to use second generation stamping for some of these because my stamp got so wet. I was spraying, I think, too close to the stamp, and look, I slopped some extra color on this middle card, but that's okay. I'll work on that later. That's one of the cool things about watercolor paper is you can pull some of that color back up. So I didn't worry about hitting the center of these. Flowers are all very individual and very different, very unique. Now I've got this last very detailed image of the rose. I was tempted to stamp it full strength, but I ended up going ahead and spritzing it, and I did get some second generation stamping from those as well because they were very wet. And you do have to be careful when you're doing this because you will lose little droplets of that color onto your cards, like here. But it's okay because we're going to fill all this in with a lot. Now look here, I got my finger into the rose below and it just goes downhill, but that's okay. I'm going to keep going because eventually it'll get okay, right? And we're going to fill so much of this area in with color that it's not even going to matter. I'm going to take a little bit of this Pacific Point. This is just a personal preference. I like to add a little bit more depth to my flower pot. And depending on which side of my flower pot had more ink, that's the side I kind of put my shadow on. This is absolutely a moot point as well. It's a personal preference. You will not even notice this when we're done. I'm going to go ahead and take the old olive and stamp in our leaves while the roses dry and the flower pots dry. I'm inking once and stamping twice and just continuously rotating this around so that it's most comfortable for my hand and the positioning of the stamp. And you can already see how these are coming together. It's turning into a bouquet. Odd numbers are best, and I like to stamp a little leaf on the bottom like it fell off the flowers. I just think it makes it more realistic instead of it's just floating out there in La La Land. Now I'm going to take the aqua painter and just very hurriedly add water to these leaves. I did speed this up, but I did do this very quickly. For me, if I go faster and don't worry about it, I'm able to create more freely, if that makes any sense. I'm going to take Lovely Lilac and stamp these little filler flowers. And I'm just filling in, just kind of random. Some of them end up in the same place on the same card and some of them don't. It does not matter. No two people are going to be looking at these cards side by side. They're all going to look very unique, and some of them are going to look similar because of the leaf placement. The leaves were all in the same place. Now I'm stamping the Coastal Cabana and just filling in wherever I think those will fit. You can kind of see I'm, moving around, trying to figure out where I want to put them. And now I'm going to take an aqua painter and drop a dot of water on every one of those tiny little flowers. What it's going to do is when this water absorbs into the watercolor paper, it's just going to dissolve that ink and mute those out very nicely. And they will kind of become a background flower, and we will address that again in a little bit to bring them back. So I've got a red and I've got this kind of magenta. One's a Crayola and one's a Cra-Z-art. They're both washable kids markers, and I am just scribbling in some lines and petals for my roses. And I went kind of outside the red stamping onto that Blush Blossom stamping just to fill those in and make them a little bit fuller. I probably didn't need to do that, but I was compelled to, so I just went with it. I do find that the looser I hold my marker, and I am literally just marking and scribbling and dotting on these things. Now I like to take this darker marker and do a little squiggle in the middle for the tightest part of the rose in the center. And now I'm doing this very loose scribbly petals around the edges. And the watercolored ones were just fine. They were pretty in their own right. You can compare them here. But I am compelled to add that extra depth and extra color. So that's what I do. Just do it. And I really like how they turned out. So do what is most comfortable to you. Because you can see they were lovely and the depth of them were different. And that's the cool thing about doing florals is no two flowers are alike. And they're very unique, and it all comes together. Just keep adding layers. Okay, I'm going to add the little lines into the leaves, and I'm just doing that full strength on every set of leaves with the old olive. I just felt like they needed that dark color. And now I'm going to take the Lucky Limeade and dilute it a little bit with some water and add these kind of filler leaves. They're, when you take a photograph of a bouquet of flowers or really anything, you get the things in the forefront that are very crisp in your photograph, and the things in the background are very muted and kind of blend in with the background. That's what these leaves are. They're in the background. They're a hint of a leaf, a whisper of a leaf, and foliage. And I'm just dropping them in wherever I feel like there needs to be one. And then I'm grabbing some more of this green, and now I'm filling in. I'm skirting around very quickly around all of the leaves and all of the blooms. You will pick up more green from the leaves and some red from the roses and some blue from the flower pot, but it adds into the shadows and the depth of the overall picture. You can already see the difference between the one that's filled in and the one that's not. And I just really love that. And I try to let this color blend out in a way into nothing as it gets higher on the design. And sometimes that works out. Right here I had a really big division between the dark and the light, and I just pulled some of that back off, and I'm just going to let it go, because if I, dilly-dally too much, I get too hung up on about it's not perfect, and I keep messing with stuff, and the more I mess with stuff, it goes downhill. It doesn't typically get better. So I just left that one alone and went on to the next one. And then, well, I guess I didn't. I went back and I added, there's a few little white places where I saw that I could add a little bit more green. Okay, so do as much or as little as makes your heart content. And I'm going to take the Coastal Cabana and I'm going to stamp on top of all the little blue flowers again and give them some more definition. This gives them back some definition. I'm not stamping exactly lined up with the first stamping. I'm just very quickly going through, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the lovely lilac. And it gives the illusion of more blooms in behind. And I like that. I like the depth that creates. So my green has dried enough. I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment. I didn't really intend to stamp this sentiment to the left. I was thinking I'll have to stamp it over the flowers or over the flower pot, and it just fit in there perfectly. And then when I got down to stamping the May, I was like, it's going to stamp on top of the leaves, but you know what? I actually like it. Now, I am going to doodle on top of the roses with the black because I'm a bit of a control freak, and there was no outline image for this flower, and so for me, they just felt incomplete. They would have been fine. They would have been very nice as a watercolorly painting, but I love the way the black makes everything pop. I'm only doing the rose blooms, and then the black of the rose blooms really creates a triangle with the sentiments, and just, I don't know, it grounds everything, I guess, for me. And so just, again, really quickly, loosely holding this marker and just filling that in. Now, I've got this very old green Sharpie marker, and it's almost dry. I probably need to toss it and get a new package of these fine point in the different colors. I'm drawing in the stems of the roses and a little bit of a hint of a stem for the leaves. It doesn't have to be precise. It doesn't have to even be all the way there. It's that thing that your brain fills in the rest of the picture, even if it's not there. And I think that's really cool. So I think every little detail that you can add adds something, no matter how small. So now I'm taking this dark purple and dotting over the little purple flowers, and then I'm going to take this vibrant blue and dot over the blue flowers, and if some of them ended up with more, I'm adding an extra dot, and that's perfectly fine. So pretty cool. So now let's take one of these name tags and turn it into a card. Because my little panels are 2.5 by 3 1/4, I went and got a scrap piece of black cardstock and I cut it 1/4 taller and 1/4 inch wider, just to create a little mat for this so that it would pop even more off of this extra red card base. I'm going to use some glossy accents to glue this to the mat. And then I'm also going to use glossy accents to glue it to the card base. Glossy accents is acid-free. It's not going to turn the cardstock. The non-acid-free glues will bleach the cardstock. It is the weirdest thing. I made some little notepad holders with some sticky notes and used some non-acid-free. Let me tell you, where I did tape runner on those sticky notes, bleached the whole pad of sticky notes. It was just the craziest thing. So if you want it to last for years to come, use an acid-free glue. And I'm just gluing that to the center, and look how this pops. Very nice. I think I could stamp a little bee up here at the top of the bouquet and would look nice to fill in that area where the name would be. Thanks so much for joining me. If you have any questions, be sure and let me know.